Good morning. My name is Martha Cattell, and for the last year, I've been serving as the team leader for a group called the Ministerial Transition Team that we've had in place at the church. Now that we've called our next senior minister, it's time for us to begin saying goodbye to Christine. We don't have to do it today, but in just 3 short months, at the end of August, the time will be upon us. Christine has to say goodbye as our senior minister so that Angela can take over, and so that she can move on in her retired life after almost 30 years of being the senior minister of First Unitarian. And for 1 year, she also says a very complete goodbye to us. She won't be around on Sundays, or during the week even, and she won't be in contact with the congregation's members or friends. She's got work to do, getting used to the idea that she's not in charge around here anymore. We know that. That she has an identity besides that of being our minister, and that her ministry now is to the world and not just to us. And we have work to do too, getting used to looking to Angela as our senior minister. Angela's work is to step up into that leadership without looking first to Christine for that nod of reassurance. Ministers and congregations over time have found this adjustment to be difficult, and it can be catastrophic for everyone when it's not done well. For that reason, an edict enforced by the ministry has developed that requires departing ministers to stay completely away for at least a year. Christine and Angela have known about this for their whole careers. They heard about it in ministry school, in seminary. For those of us who are just hearing about it, I know it seems kind of harsh. However, I think upon reflection that you'll see the wisdom in it. We want to make a strong bond with our new senior minister. We want her to be secure in her leadership, and we want Christine to be able to return to this congregation in the role of an honored member. So everyone has to hit the reset button now and begin our new relationships in August. When August comes, we'll be celebrating Christine's ministry and saying goodbye to her for the year. You won't have to snub her if you run into her in the grocery store or the library. But she won't be at church, and she won't be making new friends in the congregation or coming to our events. Especially serving as minister for the people of this congregation will no longer be her duty. No, not even for marriages or memorial services. That will be Angela's job. If all goes well, sometime late in 2018, we will welcome Christine back. She says she wants to help in the garden, and she wants to sit with her husband in the service week after week. Also, speaking of William, this separation does not necessarily apply to him. He and Angela have agreed that William will continue to be around next year. He gets this year to practice not being the minister's husband, but he can only do that if we just don't deluge him with questions about how is Christine. So that's a deal. We're not going to bother William about that. So this all seems like a really big change, I know. But this morning, Christine is going to talk to us a little bit more about how she sees this working. You guys have been so incredibly good at this transition that we've been going through for the last year, and I just have every confidence that the next year will go just as well. Thank you.
Christine is going to show us how to learn to say goodbye with help from George Washington, who was in a similar position a little over 200 years ago. After being twice elected president of this new nation, if you can believe it, unanimously, he decided to retire and not run for a third term, and he had to say goodbye. And his farewell address is an American classic. In the hit musical Hamilton, Washington's young assistant, Alexander Hamilton, has to come to terms with his mentor's choice, as Washington himself does a masterful job of saying goodbye.
Mr. President, you asked to see me.
No, you're busy.
What do you need, sir? Sir?
I want to give you a word of warning.
Sir, I don't know what you heard, but whatever it is, Jefferson started it.
Thomas Jefferson resigned this morning.
You're kidding.
I need a favor.
Whatever you say, sir, Jefferson will pay for this behavior.
Talk
I'll
less.
use the press. I'll write under a pseudonym. You'll see what I can do to him.
I need you to draft an address.
Yes, he resigned. You can finally speak your mind.
Stepping down so he can run for president.
Ha! Good luck defeating you, sir.
I'm stepping down. I'm not running for president.
I'm sorry, what?
One last time. Relax, have a drink with me. One last time. Let's take a break tonight, and then we'll teach him how to say goodbye. To say goodbye. You and I.
No, sir.
I
Why?
want to talk about neutrality.
Sir, with Britain and France on the verge of war, is this the best time?
Born against partisan fighting.
But
Pick up a pen, start writing. I want to talk about what I have learned, the hard-won wisdom I have earned.
as far as the people are concerned, you have to serve. You could continue to serve.
One last time, the people will hear from me. One last time, and if we get this right, we're gonna teach them how to say goodbye. You and I.
Mr. President, they will say you're weak.
No, they will see we're strong.
Your position is so unique.
So I'll use it to move them along.
Why do you have to say goodbye?
If I say goodbye, the nation learns to move on. It outlives me when I'm gone. Like the scripture says, everyone will sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. They'll be safe in the nation we've made.
I want to sit under my own vine and fig tree, at home and alone in the shade, at home in this nation we've made. One last time.
One last time.
Though in reviewing the incidents of my administration, I am unconscious of intentional error, I am nevertheless too sensible of my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. I shall also carry with me the hope that my country will view them with indulgence, and that after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service with an upright zeal, the faults of incompetent abilities will be consigned to oblivion, and I myself must soon be to the mansions of rest. I anticipate with pleasing expectation that retreat in which I promise myself to realize the sweet enjoyment of partaking in the midst of my fellow citizens, that benign influence of the good laws of a free government, that ever-favorite object of my heart, and the happy reward, as I trust, of our labors, and dangers. One last time.
George Washington's going home.
Teach them how to say goodbye.
George Washington's going home.
And going home.
Washington's going
Teach them how to say goodbye. Teach them how to say goodbye. Say goodbye. Say goodbye. One last time. It's just the best job in the world, you know. So one of the things that we do when we say goodbye is to tell stories, to tell why this relationship was important and unique and wonderful. So here's a story. When we were planning my installation way back in January of 1989, I was asked if I had any special requests for music. And mindful of the fact that this congregation was very oriented to classical chamber music in those days, I suggested a work by Aaron Copland called In the Beginning, which I've always liked, and it seemed topical. And so it was the interlude, sung by a local singer, Kathleen Clausen. We didn't meet again for many years, but I would notice her name on programs or see her perform and remember that connection to the beginnings here in my ministry in Albuquerque. So it was great fun to discover a few years back that our new accountant, Alan Clausen, was Kathleen's husband. And through him, we met their son, Chris, and discovered that he too was a fine singer. And it was Chris, of course, who sang the part of George Washington right just now. So my ministry has been bookended with two Clausens, as well as aided in the office by a third. That long trajectory with people and families means a lot to me as I say goodbye. So young Mr. Hamilton, shocked and grieved that his mentor is going to refuse to run for a third term, mourns. In the space of a couple of dozen fabulous lines, his shock turns to disbelief, to argumentativeness, to depression, and to acceptance. And those are the common ways we express grief. And we grieve not only when someone dies, but when things are taken from us, when our life changes, when our kids grow up, when our friendships end, when we ourselves face death, and when our minister retires. Our lives are full of losses. Some are necessary ones that no one escapes except by the greatest loss of all, which is death. We all have to grow up and leave our childhoods behind. We have to grow old and leave our wonderful younger bodies and selves as we move on. And then there are all the extra losses that come with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, robberies and divorces, school moves and job losses, health issues, friendship dramas. Almost all the events of our lives, even the good ones, come with losses. You know what a bachelor party is for, don't you? It's the final fling of singlehood, and it's usually celebrated with too much drinking because in spite of the joyous wedding about to be celebrated, everybody is more than a little bit sad at what is being left behind. There's a lot of saying goodbye in our lives, and it's important to do well, to feel what we feel, to say what we need to say. We have to move on. If we don't let ourselves notice and mourn our losses, the weight of unsaid goodbyes accumulates in our hearts. It weighs us down, gets in our way, all that extra baggage. Keeps us from forming new relationships, from tackling new tasks, from joy. Oh yeah, we have to learn to say goodbye. George Washington, a wise man who has, after all, been thinking about his departure for quite a while, patiently answers Hamilton's questions. No, they won't think he's weak. Yes, he has to do this. And why? Because if I say goodbye, the nation learns to move on. It outlives me when I'm gone. And of course, a healthy, long-lived nation was the object from the first. George Washington didn't agree to become president because of the honor of the thing or the amount of golf he was going to get to play. He did it to create a nation, and he knows that to have it thrive in the long run, he has to get out of the way. It's true of nations, of companies, which often don't survive the departure of their founder, of families, which can come apart if goodbyes don't get done well, of raising children, oh my, of raising children. And parents who can't say goodbye to their sweet and adoring 10-year-olds who needs them for nearly everything are in for a turbulent decade. And their child's growth may be impeded as well. We all have to learn to say goodbye so we can move on and thrive. President Washington is also wise enough to know that he knows that this hard-won wisdom of his doesn't come naturally. He knows that he and Mr. Hamilton will have to teach the American people, who by all accounts were hanging on to their president for dear life, all too apt to love him into the kingship which would have destroyed this barely born experiment in democracy, and teach them how to say goodbye. I get it that nobody likes this. I myself, glad as I am to be leaving the world of full-time, more than full-time work, have noticed myself thinking that rather than face the summer of goodbyes, perhaps I would prefer to die in office after all. However, beginning with my era, one of the things that was drummed into our heads in theological school and ministers' meetings is that we ministers owe it to our people to say a good and thorough and time-consuming goodbye. Ministers play a powerful role in people's lives. Half leader, half wisdom figure, half God, half mom. Are you starting to get the feeling of a little larger than life here? All the more important, then, to say goodbye well. And I am not inclined to doubt what I learned because I learned it the hard way, right here. My predecessor, Todd Taylor, a generation in ministry older than I, in a generation which had not been instructed in the importance of ministerial endings, had just up and left, I was told. He was a wonderful minister, the best the congregation had experienced. And your predecessors in this church said, we loved him and we didn't even get to say goodbye. We didn't even get to have a party, I was told, over and over. No one knew why he had left, it seemed, though it was no secret. I knew why. I'd been told both by the district executive and by Todd himself. He had inherited money about this time of the year, found that he was now financially secure enough to retire, and had given his 3 months' notice. In those days, ministers took a 3-month summer leave, so it had been a very abbreviated goodbye. Todd was of the old school, and that was not so unusual. As a matter of fact, there was a goodbye party. I found the pictures. But one hastily arranged party isn't really enough. And the emotional truth of the congregation was that they didn't get to say goodbye. And you know, it really showed. While some people greeted their new minister with open arms and hearts, there were many other arms folded across the chests. The president of the congregation said a few words before leading the congregation in the words of installation to the effect that, ministers come and go, let's not take this too seriously. Uh-oh, I thought. This is maybe harder than I thought it was going to be, which it was. There were lots of factors at play in the trials and tribulations of our first, 13 or so years together. And I am most willing to say, like George Washington, that while I didn't make any intentional errors, I also know that my incompetent abilities were certainly a part of those years too. Still, it would have helped in a lot of ways, actually, if the congregation had resolved its grief over their last minister's departure by saying goodbye to him more carefully. So I've known from the beginning that however long I stayed here, and in the beginning I thought that would be 4 or 5 years, that I would say a good goodbye. Angela will no doubt have plenty of things to mutter about as she really digs into the incomplete projects, messes, and precedents I've left for her. But this goodbye thing, we're going to do this right. 4 sermons on different parts of saying goodbye, and partings and gatherings and appreciations, visits to the branches, rituals and last meetings. Many candles lit and goodbyes said, notes penned and cards read, and tears shed, that too. But we'll also have fun. Really, We will. And then we will part unburdened and ready to face our future. Okay, so here are some elements of a good goodbye. First of all, you want to say or imply that this relationship or the part of it that's ending has been a really important relationship. And you imply this just by taking the time and emotional energy to say goodbye, and it never hurts to actually say it out loud. The younger generation thinks that it's invented a new approach to ending relationships. They call it ghosting. And if you listen carefully as I describe it, you may hear echoes of generations past. To ghost is just to walk away and become uncontactable. You leave the party without saying goodbye or thank you. You're ending a relationship, you send your Dear John letter, or maybe you don't even do that. But anyway, after that, you don't pick up the phone, you block the messages, you unfriend, and you return letters to the sender. In whatever generation this kind of behavior occurs, this just go theory of relationship ending seems like a good idea in the short term. No drama, no tears, but it makes the ending and separation incredibly more painful for the person being ghosted. Because ghosts may be unavailable and uncontactable, but they are still floating around, and they are very uncomfortable companions for the ghoster and the ghostee both. They weigh us down. So that's the first step, to create a significant time and place to say goodbye. To say, this relationship was important to me. I learned something. I experienced something. I'm so glad, even though it is ending, that we knew each other. Second step is to tie up loose ends. So according to circumstances, there's the thank you. When relationships are ending or changing, it's important to express whatever gratitude we can muster. Thanks for the memories, for the good time, for the care and consideration you gave. If we're honest, we can even thank our enemies for toughening us up. And then there may be a need for an I'm sorry, for whatever reason, even if you don't know for what. George Washington didn't know of anything he'd done wrong, not on purpose anyway, but he knew he must have made some mistakes. Of course, we all do. And then, if need be, there's the I forgive you. In the musical Wicked, in which there's a great goodbye scene between the good witch of the north and the wicked witch of the west, sisters who've been at war all their lives, one sings to the other, and just to clear the air, I ask forgiveness for all the things you blame me for. Which is rich, isn't it? But the other one graciously answers, well, as to that, there's always blame to share, and none of it seems to matter anymore. Do you feel lighter already? Sometimes there are things to talk out here because understanding always helps clear the air. This in no way excuses how I hurt you that time, but here's what was going on with me when I did that hurtful thing. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. The third part of a good goodbye is putting our feeling into words. I appreciate you, if it's true. It's been good knowing you. I love you. So important. So hard for some of us to say. And this is implicit in love, but sometimes it needs to come out in the open. Because I love you, I want you to continue to grow and change, to have new lovers, to love your new minister, to grow a beard, to move to Italy, to do whatever it is you haven't done around me. Don't let me or my memory hold you back. You have my permission to change. And then, last but not least, goodbye. And say goodbye remembering what it means. The English word goodbye is a contraction of God be with you. In other words, it's a blessing. It's the same in Spanish. Adios, a Dios, to God. And in French, the same thing. Adieu, adieu. Although we often part company with some variation of see you soon, a real goodbye is different. What we really mean when we say goodbye is, this is a parting. But it also means, and it is a blessing on your way. Farewell. Farewell is a more secular way of saying the same thing. A good goodbye is a blessing. It's a blessing to you and to the one you say goodbye to, because it gives closure to a relationship. And that closure frees us to make new relationships that will bless our lives and our future. Yep, and here's the thing. The more wonderful our relationships are, the harder it is to say goodbye. It's part of the calculus of being human. To be having a hard time saying goodbye is to know your life has been blessed. My life has been so blessed by you, the people of this church. It has been wonderful to be your minister, and I'm looking forward to the next 3 months. I really, really am. It's going to be hard to say goodbye, but by gosh, we are going to do it. The sacred work of saying goodbye.